Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. This is Amanda. I hope everyone is doing well. So in this video, we're going to be looking at some artifacts that are linked to the Exodus. So let's just jump right into it. So in this video, we're going to be looking at some of the archaeological discoveries in Egypt and compare them to the Bible to see what timeline the Exodus was in and if this timeline that I am going to be talking about fits the biblical narrative of the time of the Exodus. 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1 states, "In the 480th year after the Israelites came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, he began to build the house of the Lord." This specific chronological marker has been subject of much discussion, especially when certain other Old Testament passages appear to point to a different span of years between the Exodus and the construction of the temple. Some have suggested a conflict with alternative genealogies or periods mentioned in the books of Judges and Samuel. However, when examined closely, the 480th year timeline can be consistently reconciled with the broader Old Testament record. Solomon's reign being recognized in the second half of the 10th century and the building of the temple around 967 BC. 480 years prior to that puts us in the middle of the 15th century, more specifically around the year 1446 BC. The 15th century was a pivotal time in Egypt's history. This was the 18th dynasty, and the 18th dynasty of Egypt was the first dynasty of the New Kingdom, a period of great power and prosperity. It began with Ahmose I expelling the Hyksos, who were foreign rulers. They were Semitic people from the Levant. They were shepherd kings, and they were expelled during this New Kingdom era. The Hyksos that weren't expelled were enslaved. Remarkably, the Hyksos capital of Avaris and the nearby city of Ramses lie in the very region the biblical identifies as Goshen. The Hyksos, the Semitic people who ruled Egypt's 15th dynasty, left behind evidence of their prominence until their world came to an end in the Exodus. Astonishingly, royal seals unearthed here bear the name Yaakov Har, the biblical name for Jacob, alongside Sarar Har, echoing Ishkar, one of Jacob's sons, meaning this is a reward. These discoveries suggest that the Semitic rulers of Avaris, known as the Hyksos, may have been the family of Joseph, rising to power as the Bible recounts. Other variations suggest the ring belonged to Joseph, son of Jacob, given to him by the Pharaoh when he became second in command in Egypt. These theories argue that the Har element in the name may refer to a specific title or location, or even a reference to the one true God. In the ancient soil of Goshen, beneath the ruins of Avaris, archaeologists uncovered a tantalizing mystery, a tomb of a Semitic man marked by a shattered statue of a figure in a vibrant, multicolored coat, a garment echoing the biblical tale of Joseph. Unlike typical plundered graves, this tomb was eerily empty, its bones removed, defying the habits of ancient tomb raiders. This could be the long-lost resting place of Joseph, the Hebrew vizier whose bones were carried away during the Exodus. In Exodus chapter 13, verse 19, it says, "Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, 'God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you.'" The Hyksos, who were shepherd kings, aligns with the biblical narrative in Genesis. Genesis chapter 46, verse 33 through 34 says, "When Pharaoh calls you in and asks, 'What is your occupation?' you should answer, 'Your servants have tended livestock from our boyhood on, just as our fathers did.' Then you will be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen, for all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians." After the death of Joseph and those in his generation, the following generations of Israelites had become populous in number. The Egyptians feared potential integration or takeover, so they enslaved the Israelites. Exodus chapter 1 verses 6 through 7 says, "Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died, but the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them." Now let's take a look at the pharaohs from the 15th century, because it's very interesting. There's only 5 in that century, so let's take a look. During the reign of Thutmose I, from 1506 BC to 1493 BC, the Hyksos had significant influence in the Levant. Thutmose vanquished the Hyksos, giving Egypt control of the area. The pharaoh's rule saw military reforms that elevated Egypt to the status of a Near Eastern powerhouse. His son Thutmose II continued the offensive in Canaan to protect Egypt's borders. Thutmose I had no sons from his wife and queen, but had a daughter, Hatshepsut. He had a son from a secondary wife, who was Thutmose II. When he died, Hatshepsut married her half-brother, Thutmose II. So during this time period, Hatshepsut is the only woman who could have had the title Pharaoh's daughter, the designation given in Exodus to the person who saved Moses and later adopted him. So Thutmose II's reign with Hatshepsut as his queen and sister was neither long nor impressive. He was a sickly pharaoh who did not produce a male heir through Hatshepsut, but instead bore him a daughter. But like his father, Thutmose II, however, did bear a male heir, Thutmose III, through a concubine. Thutmose III was just 2 years old when his father died. As such, his stepmother, Hatshepsut, initiated a 22-year co-regency during which she became a truly remarkable pharaoh in her own right. Considered one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, man or woman, Hatshepsut brought great wealth and artistry to her land. She sponsored one of Egypt's most successful trading expeditions, bringing back gold, ebony, and incense from a place called Punt. She secured her legacy by building structures that still stand today. She added 200-foot-tall obelisks at the Great Temple Complex at Karnak. One is still intact. She built the mortuary temple, which is called the Holy of Holies, a structure with several floors of columns in front where she'd eventually be buried. Hatshepsut was usually carved or drawn as a man, complete with muscles and a beard, as was the artistic tradition for pharaohs. But historians knew the truth. She always made sure the art included a reference to being a woman, such as daughter of Re or His Majesty herself. When she died in Egypt, would not see as powerful a female ruler for another 1,400 years when Cleopatra came to the throne. Hatshepsut's pacifist tactics didn't sit well with Thutmose III, who sought to restore Egypt's former ruler's vision of the country. He was a staunch supporter of military campaigns to safeguard Egypt's borders and commercial interests. One notable battle was the Battle at Megiddo, became legendary, and its devastating consequences inspired the biblical narrative of Armageddon. The conflict marked a significant turning point in Egypt's history, granting the pharaoh control over critical Bronze Age trade routes for the next few centuries and helping to secure the empire's borders. At Megiddo, where a battle was fought between Egyptians and Canaanites, Pharaoh Thutmose provides us with specifics of his campaign and how events unfolded during the clash. The Egyptian records provide valuable information about troops, the strength of each side, strategies, logistics, and the spoils of victory. This account was the first of its kind in history and set a standard for future battle descriptions. Only after several further campaigns, conducted almost annually, was the unrest cooled. One unanticipated result came in the form of the word Armageddon, which took its root from Megiddo's name. Because Thutmose III, his rule was so long, he is often identified as the pharaoh who died during Moses' 40-year exile in Midian, making his successor, Amenhotep II, the pharaoh of the Exodus. Amenhotep II ruled from 1427 to 1401 BC. He ruled for 26 years, and he was not a firstborn, and he was a military leader. He's believed to be the pharaoh of the Exodus. So the fact that his father reigned for over 40 years, a period often associated with Moses' youth and time in Midian, which fits the biblical account of Moses leaving Egypt and returning years later. Some biblical scholars point out that Thutmose, his son, Thutmose IV, his successor, was not a firstborn son, which is consistent with the biblical account that the pharaoh's firstborn son died in the 10th plague. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 29, it says, "At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well." Pharaoh Amenhotep II was not a firstborn, and if all of the firstborn in Egypt died and he lived, then I believe he was the pharaoh of the Exodus. And then the pharaoh after him was also not a firstborn, so that indicates that his firstborn died. Other evidence that supports that Pharaoh Amenhotep II was the pharaoh of the Exodus is the fact that his mummy was found, and it has unusual bumps on its skin. And some people interpret that as the boils connected to the biblical plagues of Egypt. Exodus chapter 14, verses 29 through 30. "But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore." So a lot of people believe that the pharaoh of the Exodus drowned, but it says right here that they saw them lying dead on the shore. So that's how it's interesting that Amenhotep's mummy has all the boils. The brutality of slavery comes to life in the tomb of Rekhmir, a vizier in ancient Thebes during the 15th century BC. Here, vivid paintings depict Semitic men identified as captives toiling under the watchful eyes of Egyptian overseers. One scene shows us Semitic men shaping bricks. The inscription on the wall says, "The taskmaster, he says to the builders, 'The rod is in my hand, be not idle.'" The inscription provides a vivid illustration of the management of forced labor in ancient Egypt, where overseers used the threat of physical punishment, the rod, to ensure workers met their quotas and did not slow down. This scene is often cited for its strong parallels to the biblical account of the Israelites' enslavement and brickmaking in Egypt, where they also described as being beaten for not fulfilling their quotas, and that's in Exodus chapter 5, verse 14. So in the Bible, we can find more clues, and I'd like to look at Numbers chapter 20, because that tells us where Aaron died, and it says it was on Mount Hor. So what's interesting about that is that nearby where Aaron was buried on Mount Hor is a rock. It's a snake monument that is close by, and this is also in the area of Petra. And Petra is so impressive. It's amazing. I just love the look of Petra. It's a really cool area, and this is in the Jordan. So nearby where Aaron is buried is this snake monument. In the early 1900s, some archaeologists discovered that this snake monument was actually a tomb. In the tomb was some artifacts, and one thing that they found was a black staff with white paint. It had white paint on it, and it was Egyptian. They translated what it said on the staff, and it said "Steward of Thutmose." The lateral obelisk, which is outside of the Pope's house, is the last Egyptian obelisk to be brought to Rome, and it is the largest in the world. It was originally built by Thutmose III, and they have this right outside the Vatican where the Pope lives, and I thought that was rather interesting. And whether they know that this could possibly be connected to the time of Moses, I'm not sure. Maybe they do know. I'm not sure. But I thought that was just interesting. So these are just some things that I had came across and, I found interesting and, I think is very intriguing, and I'd like to know your guys' thoughts and comments. So please comment down below,